Hello to everyone this morning. It is great to have you here. My name is Sharon and I'm with SIPA, the Statewide Internet Portal Authority. In today's webinar, Resultant will show us how to leverage Microsoft to help our organizations thrive. A bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please note that during this webinar, you are muted, but if you have questions or would like to communicate with the presenters at any point during the webinar, please use the chat box. We will try to address some questions as we go along, but we'll save time at the end of the webinar for any remaining Q&A. We'll have some poll questions for you to answer as well during the presentation and appreciate your feedback. Please welcome our presenter, Ryan Gould with Resultant, along with Stephanie Neer and Lisa Cabot. We greatly appreciate their time sharing how Microsoft can save us time and money. Thank you all for joining us today. Take it away, Ryan.
Thanks, Sharon. So poll question probably going to pop up. Interested to know like how many folks, as I'm trying to get to know you guys as an audience, how many of you folks are using Microsoft products and specifically Microsoft Cloud today? And as you guys kind of answer that, let me just introduce myself a little bit in the organization. Really appreciate all of you being here today. As she said, my name is Ryan Gould. I've been part of Resultants for almost 13, 14 years. I was one of the original employees. I helped build our managed services practice, our projects team, our Microsoft partnership, our VCO practice. I've done recruitment, leadership, sales, you name it. I've done just about everything in this organization. So I'm excited to get here and talk with you all today. Today, my job is super interesting. I really get to serve as an advocate to organizations like yours. It's a pretty unique role. I don't have delivery goals. I don't have sales goals. I just get to meet with folks, talk to them, learn about the challenges they're facing, help connect them with the right set of services, tools, partnerships, so on and so forth. So I'm excited to get to know all of you today. I also get to work with folks like Lisa Cabot, who I think a lot of you know already. She's incredible. She brings just more energy to any conversation than any 10 people, and is the biggest advocate for all the clients that she brings to the table. So get to work with her a lot. So hopefully you guys know her and can get to know me as well. What we have on the agenda today, actually, do we have poll results after that first question?
We do. So far, it is at 15 or 63% yes, and 9 or 38% no.
Got it. Okay. Well, so a good mix of folks. So drop down to the agenda slide. Yeah, perfect. Actually, let me get this. I got the poll as well. There we go. So as far as agenda is concerned, I want to talk about a little bit about how powerful Microsoft can be. It's a lot of folks end up choosing it as a platform to go solve challenges. Obviously, the poll shows there's a lot of you already there. But it's also pretty immense, and we could be here days talking about it. So I really tried to focus it down to what I think is probably most meaningful to y'all, but certainly if there are other questions you have, I'm happy to answer anything Microsoft, but I am trying to tailor it a little bit to meaningful stuff today. So we're gonna talk a lot about M365 specifically, and how it's used to solve distributed workforce problems. I can talk shop about anything though. So any questions you guys have, please ask along the way. I actually do a lot better when you ask questions rather than just talking to a screen. So I appreciate any comments and feedbacks along the way that we can talk about. And then at the very end, obviously we'll talk a little bit about kind of how partnerships work with folks like us, how you need a good partner to at least help architect solutions. Maybe you got an internal team that you can go implement, maybe you don't, but we can talk about what that looks like as well. A little bit more about Resultant as a company, right? So I'll give you the marketing spiel, right? We're a modern consulting firm, right? We really try to focus on outcomes driven by data and technology and digital transformation. And all that's to say is like we have a really, really broad set of services that we tend to deliver to most markets, public and private. We don't tend to be the organization that pops in and pops out with, like these little micro projects. We tend to spend a lot of time really getting to know the folks that we serve. really try to understand the needs and struggles that they have, and develop meaningful technology to go help that. So we don't have one standard kind of go-to approach for everything. We don't have one standard set of products and solutions that we use for everybody. Everything is a little bit more tailored in our approach to the specific organizations that we're serving. So let's jump into it, right? So Microsoft is massive, right? It's one of the three big dogs in town, but and even inside their own ecosystem, they have giant divisions of folks that don't always know one side from the other. So it's been a full-time job for a long time to understand the Microsoft ecosystem. So, but to narrow it down, we're going to talk about the cloud a little bit. And why folks tend to choose Microsoft Cloud. Well, pretty straightforward, I think. And some of these are, a little of my opinion. Some of them are, from the industry expertise, but generally this is why people choose the cloud, right? So they have a holistic support for legacy and applications and tools. They made it very easy to take existing workloads and move into their ecosystem, recognizing that it's incredibly hard just to walk away and start fresh. So Microsoft really paid attention to that when they built their cloud. They also made it pretty highly wizard driven, right? So you can get going in Microsoft Cloud solutions pretty quickly with out of the box setups, and then manage it pretty seamlessly going forward. They've been an enterprise player for a long time. Obviously, they do just understand and get the space. Why a lot of smaller organizations like Microsoft Cloud is they can take advantage of the existing investments they made. So especially around licensing, you can tend to take that with you when you go to the cloud. There's a lot of subject matter expertise hanging around, right? They've been building for decades. There's over 2 million Microsoft certified professionals today. So it's not that hard to find expertise. They've got great hybrid cloud offering. So they again recognizing that not everybody can go straight from on-prem to the cloud in a single blow. So there's lots of good hybrid solutions. Great for DR. They spent a lot of time building up their platform services, so doing application modernization, focusing on the distributed workforce, which is what we're going to focus on today, and even some of the traditional hosting. Microsoft does really, really well. So they are a really good solution, depending, regardless of where you're at in the life cycle of kind of your technology stack. Some of the most common needs I see people using Microsoft's products to solve for, distributed workforce, right? It's a big one, right? So utilizing low touch deployment, doing remote policy and configuration management of people's devices and user accounts wherever they happen to be working. They have some really rich integrated collaboration products, right? So, there's a lot of folks out there who still love their Office products, and why not have an ecosystem that ties directly into those products? They've also, like I said, they also did a really good job of helping to modernize applications. So, no longer, there's no more need to have the monolithic green screen solutions. There's no much less need to have server infrastructure in a building where your folks are sitting, because a lot of those folks aren't even sitting there any longer. So they spend a lot of time making sure that a modern workplace is at the center of what they're delivering. So those are the three places that I see that people ask most about when I talk to them. Pop down one more slide, please, Stephanie. Thank you. So the ecosystem itself, I keep saying this, it's huge, right? It's often so big that it scares folks away from it, right? That's the advantage of other solutions out there. Sometimes they're really more niche, a little bit more focused. Microsoft is broad. It's productivity, it's business apps, it's email, it's data, it's hosting, it's integrations of dozens of third-party apps. The list goes on. But what I try to remind folks is it doesn't have to be everything all at once. What I like about Microsoft is it easily allows you to take off really kind of small bites at a time, digest that part of it, and then bolt on other things later. And you'll, as I talk about this later on in the slide, it's, having a good partner that can kind of help walk you through that roadmap is key. But what we're going to focus on, like I said, is really distributed workforce today, and a few of the components that I think make that up, that are most impactful. So drop down one more slide. So the first, I think, really important tool, perfect, is what I call integrated workspace, where you can which is Teams, right? And then the other big component of that is SharePoint. So that's your high level, document collaboration, storage, management, automation, things like that. And the third major component really is the underlying platform, Azure, which they got identity and hosting and services and so on and so forth. And you pair all those three together, and you can build a really cohesive distributed workforce strategy. That's frankly, since COVID happened, that's one of the out of, I don't know, 99 out of 100 solutions that we're building right now are really dedicated around these three kind of components, or a combination of the three, or all three all together. So and even as people start coming back from COVID and working more in the office, the remote workforce isn't going anywhere. What we're seeing is this trend of people shutting down these giant offices and switching to lots of smaller offices, and people working from home, and people working from shared spaces and things like that. So I don't think any of that's going away, at least hasn't slowed down for us. And so the first part of that, like I said, is integrated workspace or Teams. So I'm going to stop for a second and ask one more full question. How are meetings working for you guys today, especially video meetings? Are you getting everything out of it? Are you retaining context? Are you walking away with actions? Or do you think that there's things being left on the table? So while that comes in, flip down to a slide, and let me talk about Teams a little bit. And I'm sure all of you have heard of Teams, especially the folks that are into Microsoft today. But the biggest misconception I hear here is Teams is just a chat program. And I think that does it a disservice, right? So Teams itself, like the way I tend to categorize it is that integrated workspace. It is a single pane of glass to the rest of the Microsoft ecosystem plus, right? So it is a single pane of glass to get chat, voice, video, file sharing, bringing all your conversations, the context around the conversations you're having into one place that's persistent, reviewable, and shareable. It brings all your communication lines into one place. It brings all your collaboration into one place. It even brings external systems into one place. So a lot of folks are integrating, Google and AWS and Dropbox and Box, and pick your poison. And you're building this one-stop shop for your users to jump into it. So traditionally, right, they would have to go to a file server or a cloud account or another application or whatever. And Microsoft Teams has really made it a one-stop shop for folks to always drop into and start their day with, and know what's going on, what projects are they working on, who are they communicating with, so on and so forth. So it's a much broader solution than what a lot of folks are giving it credit for. Poll results. Looks like we have most folks feel that they could have more productivity out of their video meetings and conferences. Absolutely. We're hearing that all the time right now. The other thing we're hearing is like we don't know what video solution to use, right? So a lot of folks are still running combinations of Teams, WebEx, Zoom, pick your poison. And Teams has really done a good job of helping to streamline, like here's the video sharing tool that we use. And I got a good case study for how Teams has worked for one of our other clients. Pop back up one more slide. Yeah, thanks. So we've got a client, United Way. They were just like a lot of organizations. They had traditional servers. They had file servers. They had an internal, web page for community sharing. They really didn't. They had Zoom. They had WebEx. They had a whole mix of video conferencing solutions. But especially on the documents, right? So that this is where I think Teams and SharePoint tend to really shine is instead of like emailing files back and forth and ending up with 100 versions of files, right? You can real-time collaborate on documents as they exist. When we built this PowerPoint deck, Stephanie and we're both working on it simultaneously. I'm looking at the live copy right now. She's sharing the live copy into this video session right now. So the power of collaboration with teams is pretty immense. How we solved that with them, right? They had Microsoft 365 already. This is the thing that always kills me. A lot of folks will have Microsoft licensing already and not use the tools that they have. So this was an instance where we could save them money by eliminating other solutions. They still have traditional file servers. So the only way to get to those things is through a VPN that, everybody hates using a VPN to connect back to the organization. So get your documents in a central, secure place that you don't need VPN any longer. Collaboration across their departments was huge. They kept building these solutions and silos in their organization and recreating the wheel, inside their organization over and over and over again. So creating a seamless kind of interconnected structure that folks can work through, greatly improved the efficiency of how they are working. And of course, the multi-file versioning, that has went away because people are working out of the documents as they live. So really good solution for them. Same time, and you'll hear this when I talk about SharePoint a little bit too. We also did a SharePoint implementation for the same time for them. And the fact is, SharePoint is, this is a good probably segue. SharePoint is the collaboration platform behind the Microsoft ecosystem. So pop down a slide, please, Stephanie. Yeah. So when we talk about collaboration platform, what I'm really saying is SharePoint, right? SharePoint runs the back end of Teams, it runs the back end of OneDrive, it runs the back end of Power Apps, right? It's this platform that we're able to build all sorts of collaboration tools and productivity tools off of to get organizations more efficient and off of these legacy type of situations. So next poll question. Do your employees struggle with doc management, right? Do you end up with 100 places you got to search for documents? Do you end up with hundreds of versions? You never know which is the right version. I know the answer to this is going to be yes, but I'm interested to see what happens. And while that comes in, flip down a slide for me, Stephanie. Yeah, like I said, so SharePoint, it is the heavy lifting behind the scenes. And what I hear all the time is like, oh God, not SharePoint again. And I'm with you. I hear that frustration. The traditional on-premise SharePoint was a monolithic beast. It took a whole team of people to build it and manage it. It took a whole team of people to create content and distribute content. That is a thing of the past, right? So they darn near rebuilt the thing from the ground up. It is focused on user content creation, user application creation. They've got a lot of low-code solutions now. Seamless collaboration, both internally and externally to your organization. What are the results here? Yeah, 96% of y'all said you struggle with document management. So that's I'm not shocked there. But SharePoint, SharePoint and Teams as a combination have really done a lot to help organizations like yours, obviously, to combat that problem. The biggest one is just building a single source of truth for the data and eliminating the emailing files back and forth, the VPN to file servers to create a copy on your local desktop to load back up later. Between those two products, that problem has darn near eliminated itself. Pop down a slide for my case study here, Steph. For us, we worked with a company called Marathon Health, and they were exactly what I just described. They were actually a couple organizations that had a merger and acquisition together. They both had a legacy on-premise monolithic SharePoint implementation. They also had file shares and shared drives and user drives. They also had Dropbox and a couple other cloud document collaboration systems. And so, what we were able to do is we went in and this one is a little bit more complex than Teams. We went in and did an assessment first to really understand and modernize kind of their business and workflow processes. And once we understood that, it becomes easy. Once you understand the workflow, how the workflow should work, modern SharePoint allows for that to happen. They created an intranet for all their internal communications. They created a team structure for all their internal project collaboration. They implemented change management and training to make sure that they got good user adoption across all of their users. And it's much easier to do with modern SharePoint than the old solution. So pop down one more slide for me. And the last big component here that I wanted to talk about, I guess Azure is not really a component, but I am going to pick out some of the components to talk about it. It's the underlying platform for identity and security and infrastructure and application modernization, a lot of those things. So it looks like we got a quick poll question. What are the obstacles keeping your organization from adopting the cloud? I'm really interested to see what the answers are here. So cost, fear of disruption, fear of change. I'm interested to hear what comes into the other category. But what I often hear is cost. So I'll be interested to see what you guys say. Pop down to the next slide, please, Steph. Great. So Azure, right? And I'm specifically going to talk about the components that really feed into distributed workforce here, because it integrates deeply with M365 and SharePoint and Teams. But it's an all-in-one computing platform, right? Built around modernizing your workflows and scaling as organizations scale. The components that I think are most important here are often a lot of folks even have already with their Microsoft 365 licensing. So Azure AD, incredibly important. Microsoft Intune and its autopilot capabilities. Some of the security features that come out of the E5 licensing, mobile device management, all those kind of come part of the M365 package, depending on what licensing you have, obviously. But integrate deeply with Azure and contribute to this remote workforce environment. So what we were seeing, and if you pop down to the case study, what we were seeing was, you got the problem, global pandemic forces, all to leave our office for extended period of time. Like that broke a lot of organizations who hadn't yet adopted any cloud solutions. So now you've got folks with workstations that are connected to an on-premise domain that they're working from home. How do you get them access to their data? How do you do it securely? All the things we talked about with document collaboration with Teams and SharePoint, that became a problem. How do you manage the devices they're connecting to your organization from in a secure way? How do you get applications delivered to them, right? There's a lot of monolithic database applications that you have to be near that data to be able to access, quickly, logistically from the computer that you're working from. So we saw a lot of folks scrambling during the pandemic to get those solutions in place. Azure provided a great platform for that. So we saw a lot of folks taking their, two situations. What we saw some organizations taking their infrastructure and just porting it over to Azure, and then changing how they deliver it to their users, adopting Teams and SharePoint and things like that. But then we saw another set of clients that took the opportunity to modernize their applications at the same time. So instead of traditional database architecture, cloud-based data sourcing, instead of RDP or VDI or Citrix, from a application delivery standpoint, people are now converting to pure SaaS application models. And so Azure offers, right, both of those capabilities pretty seamlessly. And so now what I'm seeing a lot of is organizations going purely serverless. So drop the internal domain controllers, drop the file servers, drop the application servers, utilize M365, SharePoint, Azure infrastructure as a service, Azure platform as a service. We're seeing folks drop servers altogether in their environments, partly because they want a modern solution, partly because folks aren't managing these giant offices any longer as people go work from home or shared spaces. partly because, they need the flexibility to scale up and scale down quicker. So, Azure plus SharePoint plus Teams gets you this really cohesive distributed workforce environment. What's my next slide here? So I guess that leads me to, what we do for organizations. We try to be that partner, and again, that's my job in a nutshell, is to talk with organizations, because it's not just about buying, Azure consumption. It's not just about buying Microsoft 365 licensing. It's about finding someone that can help you actually solve some of the problems you're facing today with new technology. And so that's where we tend to come in. We're a partner that comes in and helps you build the strategy. And if you're not in the cloud and you don't know how to get there, we can help you figure it out. If you're in the cloud and you don't know that if you're getting the most out of it, we can help you make sure you're getting all the right adoption. Maybe you're there and you feel comfortable, but there's some advanced solutions that Microsoft has to bear in Power App and Power BI or data analytics and things like that. We can help folks mature that part of their organization. So finding that's what we do. So certainly feel free to talk to me at any time. I'm glad to do it. But there's lots of partners around that can do it. So when you're thinking about going to any of these cloud products, make sure you have found a partner that knows how to get you there and get you there in a meaningful way, and not just sell you a bunch of licensing. Our approach tends to be pretty human-centric. I think you've probably heard me talk about it over the course of this content. We're very outcome-oriented as an organization. We understand that you're not solving problems for the sake of problem solving. You're not implementing technology for the sake of running technology. That everything you guys do has to go meet some human need, and whether that's the human need for the clients and people that you serve, or whether that's the employees that serve in your organization, there's got to be a human element to it, and that's where we tend to shine. Our whole organization is built off really this idea of design thinking, where problems should always start and end with people. People helping to define the problem, people to help craft the solution to the problem, and people telling us that the problem is solved, right? And that's about all I have, I think. Oh yeah, we do have, there are several clients out in your space we're already working with today. City of Lafayette, I don't know if you know Ernesto out there. He's done some really cool stuff with the Microsoft ecosystem in the past 12 months. So if you don't know him, maybe reach out. If you do know him, reach out and see some of the cool things that he's done. But we're already starting to see a lot of progress in the Colorado space around adopting more kind of holistic Microsoft solutions. I'm happy to talk to you guys about how you guys could do the same thing. To wrap it up, and hopefully you guys have some questions for me that I can answer. Microsoft, truly is a holistic ecosystem that's got tons of products to bear that is worth looking at. From security, data sharing, visualization, collaboration, especially remote workforces. There is something for everybody. Like I said, the best way to think about it is you can take bites at a time, the stuff that's relevant to you, and then keep layering on. Happy to talk to anybody more about that. I think we are coming back for another presentation to talk about service providers in the next month. Would encourage you all to come back and listen to me ramble on about managed services. That's where my heart is nearest and dearest. That's the organization, part of the organization that I built and run for a long time. So what questions do we have today? Hopefully some.
Ryan, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. However, Ryan's email address is listed here. So, someone may have added a question. Let's see. Can you talk about the security benefits of Microsoft 365? They're crossing over from Exchange.
Yeah, I think so. That's a really good question. So I get this comparison all the time. Like I'm coming from Exchange, I'm going to Microsoft 365. It's not apples to apples, right? So they do have an apples to apples solution. So, there is like just purely Exchange Online, if that's the conversion you're making. But most people, what I see is they do more of a holistic migration. So if uh, they are thinking about how do we solve for Office licensing and Exchange licensing and SharePoint licensing and right, there's all these licensing SKUs that go into the M365 product suite. And so just native to the M365 product, they're gonna layer on security features that Exchange by itself doesn't have. So hopefully that's the direction of the question you're asking about. So there's especially if you go with the E5 licensing bundle, there's tons of security products built in. There's advanced threat protection, there's risky logon management. They're bringing a multi-factor authentication product to bear right out of the gate. If you're going to Microsoft 365, that's the quickest way to get MFA deployed to your email environment. It also has, it natively has the ability to do multi-factor authentication for other cloud products. So for instance, when I log into Dropbox or I log into my company applications, Microsoft 365 is acting as the identity provider, because behind Office 365 is Azure AD natively. So there's lots of great security that comes with innately from moving to M365. The argument I hear all the time was like, well, it's in the cloud, it's way less secure. I don't think anything could be further from the truth. They're going to layer on tons of additional security products. They've got thousands of security team members building and managing the ecosystem that is Microsoft 365, way more than any one of our organizations could throw at it. Microsoft has, and if you're really concerned about, security, they've got their GCC offering. They're one of the first to FedRAMP compliance. We have lots of organizations that are running, CJIS compliance for law enforcement. Again, Microsoft 365 just brings a lot of that natively to the solution. Of course, there's some layer on licensing for some things as well, depending on what you're trying to do, but a really good way to add security to your ecosystem.
Okay, Ryan, we have a couple other questions that have come in. One of them is, do you have any resources for best practices on structuring the SharePoint environment?
I'm going to give a really consulting-based answer, is it depends. It depends on you as an organization. So I'll give a couple examples. So us as an organization, we tend not to use SharePoint. It's all SharePoint on the back end, but we tend not to use the SharePoint a whole lot outside of organization, like more static organizational content, stuff for new hires, maybe training, video streaming, stuff that relatively stays the same. And then where we use dynamic content is on the Teams side. So almost all good collaboration solution is going to be a mixture of Teams and SharePoint. And so then in Teams, like we have, again, for us, we have a team for every client that we support. We have a team for every internal initiative we support. We have a team for each department. And then they can share, share amongst themselves accordingly. And then what we'll do is we'll layer into those department teams, for instance, we'll layer on the SharePoint site. We'll layer on, any client document collaboration systems like Dropbox or Box or whatever. And so when you get into that team structure, you have everything you need in that team structure. For you, it could be different though. Like I've got other clients who, they wanted a more traditional, like I want a division by division SharePoint structure. I tend to shy away from that just because you end up using SharePoint as a file repository. And that's not what it's intended to be, right? It's intended to be a collaboration platform, layering on, content modules, allowing for users to create content, allowing for low code development, things like that.
All right. Another question.
The last thing to layer on there is like, we almost always start with an assessment of some sort in that regard, to help people understand what their business processes are, right? What are your business processes? Where is your data stored? How does it need to be shared? And then go craft what the structure should look like.
Great. Okay. We have 2 more questions. How can I manage what files are saved to M365 and OneDrive to stay compliant? So thinking of HIPAA and other compliance regulations, are there controls, or do you have to use additional solutions for that?
Yeah, no, that stuff is built right in. So I would heavily recommend you go look at the E5 product. It comes with all the bells and whistles from data loss protection, from conditional policy rules. Can people access these files on company devices or personal devices? Can they just log into the web interface? Can they copy and paste in and out? There's a lot of granular controls that can happen there. Tools like Intune, right, for configuration and policy management. I don't want to say it's all inclusive, right? There's, the unfortunate reality is you could have a whole degree in Microsoft licensing. There may be some mixing and matching of the licensing that has to happen to get the right set of security features that you need. But for all intents and purposes, it's all there. If you need archiving, not archiving, journaling, because you need to be auditing in all inbound, outbound email contacts, Teams messaging, things like that. Vice versa, if you need chat messages to delete after 30 days or email to delete after 30 days, it's got all the built-in retention policies that you can layer on, and make sure that you're staying compliant in that regard. So it's a pretty holistic solution. Now there are occasions where you layer on additional tools, but I tend to treat those individually, right? So for organizations that are highly HIPAA compliant, sometimes they want their email to flow through a product like Zix. Zix is an industry leader in HIPAA email compliance. They're not doing all the other things that your M365 license brings to bear. So like, the application, like, for Office, Excel, and Word and things like that. They're not bringing the identity. They're not bringing the access. They're not bringing the integration with all the other tools that you're in. So I do see folks like that will sometimes go to third-party providers. But again, I think it's more use case by use case, and maybe there's an exception that you need, that your business has something that's different that you need to run through that product. But for the most part, Microsoft brings all of that to bear in a single ecosystem.
All right, and our last question, it's kind of a spin-off on the security question that was first asked, but about patching, monitoring security threats. So they said, instead of us having to jump in at every threat in Exchange, does Microsoft handle that and monitor that?
In Microsoft 365, there is no patching, right? Like it is a pure software as a service situation. I guess from the Office apps themselves, there is a patching component, but you can control that patching to Office, Excel, Word, things like that. You can control how that rolls out. They have some really great built-in tools, which I rarely see people use for some reason. So they've got risk analyzer tools, best practice tools that you can run right out of the gate and say, hey, where am I weak? Like they're gonna call out administrator accounts that don't have MFA. They're gonna call out risky logins. So let's say my user account logged into a computer in Virginia. It's gonna pop an alert and say, hey, Ryan's normally in Indianapolis. Why is he logging in Virginia? All that stuff is there. Mass file downloads, like let's say I copied all my OneDrive out to my personal desktop. It's going to send a flag to the administrator and say, hey, someone's copying their entire OneDrive to their local drive right now. That's a behavior that we're not expecting. So there's lots and lots and lots of cool things behind the scenes, especially with AI, that are helping to improve security postures for organizations.
Okay, I think that wraps up all of our questions.
Awesome. Well, anybody, please feel free to reach out. If you just want to have a conversation around Microsoft products and the ecosystem, like I said, I could talk for days on it. It is massive, and I'm happy to do so. Even if you just want to bounce some ideas, like, hey, I'm thinking about this. Is this complete? Is this holistic? Does this seem cost effective? I was just talking to a client the other day that didn't realize that Microsoft had changed some of their licensing in the past year. Business premium licensing is way cheaper than E3 plus EMS plus whatever, and I was able to save them, a few $100,000 just by making sure that they were in the right licensing SKU. I'm happy to do that with anybody. So use me. Like I said, I don't have delivery goals. I don't have sales goals. It's going to be a no pressure conversation. I just like to help people get into the right solutions.
All right. Well, thank you, Ryan and Stephanie. If you guys find, if you have more questions after we part, please don't hesitate to contact Beth or myself or Ryan. And if you want to return to this webinar to view it again or share it with a colleague, keep a lookout for our post-webinar email with the link to the video that we'll put up on our YouTube channel. Additionally, we want to make these webinars as relevant and informational as possible. So it would really be appreciated if you could take a minute and fill out the survey following the webinar. It's short, but hopefully it'll keep SIPA on track with being able to provide you with information that you're interested in. To close, I want to thank you all for being with us this morning. I especially want to thank Ryan for going in depth about Microsoft. Resultant will be back next month for our April webinar Wednesday to discuss meaningful technology partnership for public sector organizations. And the link for that to register is in the chat right now, and that'll be included later on in the post email and in our newsletter if you're unsubscribed up for those. So that's it from us. Have a fantastic day, everyone.